Hello, Internet. Gino, that Pinguino Greco here again with another episode of Deep Listens, and as always, it's good to have you. We are going to be discussing Cuphead today, or Cuphead Don't Deal with the Devil, as its subtitle seems to be, on at least the key art. And I am joined, as always, by Billy Cuphead Rothert.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I always thought of myself as more of a mugman, personally, because I also regularly drink from the fountain of my own noggin, as mugman is wont to do.
Does he do that?
Yeah, if you play co-op and you play mugman, before the match actually starts, or before the level actually starts, he'll like grab his straw and take a sip from his own head.
That's horrifying. And
take a sip, babes.
Great.
Speaking
it's great.
Of horrifying, we are also joined, as always, by Pete. I was going to say Mugman, but now Billy wants to be Mugman, so I guess you could be King Dice.
Nice. That's who I wanted to be in the first place.
He is so well dressed.
And he is the exact kind of, if I could grow facial hair, that's the sort of mustache I would want to have.
The shitty pencil mustache?
Yep. Just real thin John Waters style mustache. Drawn on. What's going on, everybody? Glad to be back around. It's always nice to talk to the fans and to my friends. So, animal fact for this week, right? I was just reading the George Orwell story where he talks about the time he had to shoot an elephant, right?
Wait, what?
Yeah, it's basically, the title's almost something like When I Shot an Elephant. I forget exactly what it's titled.
Wait, did he have to shoot an elephant, or did he shoot an elephant?
No, like the...
Did an elephant have him cornered and had a knife in its trunk, and it was like, give me your money? And
so the elephant had killed a guy.
Okay.
But by the time Orwell got to him, the reason he had to shoot him was basically like, well, British people couldn't look foolish in front of, the Indian populace they're subjugating.
Oh, great.
So no, he didn't need to shoot an elephant. There are lots of things you could say about George Orwell. We don't need to get in the whole discussion about it. But after reading that, I was like, oh, that's sad. He had to shoot an elephant. So I decided to learn more about elephants. Coolest thing I found. So their trunks, on like a full-grown elephant, the trunk can weigh, up to about 400 pounds. But their trunks are sensitive enough and dexterous enough that an elephant could use one to pick up a single grain of rice. I can barely do that with my hands, and it's doing it with a 400-pound trunk. That's nuts.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's got to be a ludicrous amount of muscle.
It's crazy.
Well, Cuphead doesn't have any elephants. It doesn't have an elephant in it? I don't think it does.
I think so. It's got elephants in the circus, but they're not like a main boss.
Yeah, you don't have to fight an evil elephant, thank goodness.
I don't think
No, those things are smart, they're big, they never forget.
They're killers.
Yes.
They have just this one's a little bit sadder, but another cool elephant fact. So elephants only have a set number of teeth. So as they grow older, they wear down, and eventually if an elephant gets old enough, it'll just starve to death because it has no teeth left.
Aw, that is kind of sad.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that sadness, if you want to send in feedback, speaking of sadness,
we want more cheerful animal facts.
We want more cheerful animal facts, and also we don't have enough feedback. So make us happier. And go ahead and send us emails at DeepListensPod or at ThatPinguino on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. You can hit up our comment sections or deeplistens.podcast@gmail.com. But without further ado, let's discuss Cuphead by Studio MDHR for the PC and the Xbox One.
Is that an acronym?
MDHR? I think it is. I think some of it is...
While I just generally bring in the narrative introduction, Gino can be fact-checking that. I assume you were going to ask me to bring in the narrative.
Oh, it's because I was going to, but yeah, the studio name is because the developers, the studio was formed by Jared and Chad Moldenhauer, so MDHR Moldenhauer.
Gotcha.
Just like all good technology companies, they got rid of all of the vowels.
Smart.
Cool.
So Cuphead, Billy, what's up with Cuphead?
So when you first turn on Cuphead, you're met with this scene of Cuphead and his good friend Mugman. They decided they're going to leave their little village and go out and just see the world. And they stumble across a casino, which, I guess two young men going off to find their way in a world will inevitably end up at a casino at some point.
Yeah. Tale of oldest time.
The casino is run by King Dice, but also in the background, the devil is also playing a part here at the casino. So the boys start
as the devil does at every casino.
Yeah. So the boys start. I guess the mugs. I don't want to instantly gender them, but it
is Mug Man, right?
Right. So Mugman's probably
Mugman.
male, but Cuphead could be either way, I guess.
Could be. Yeah. Could be.
So anyway, our dishware, our two young dishware wanderers, start rolling dice at the casino, and they go on a hot streak. They start winning, and a shady figure approaches them and says, "Hey, guess what? I'll make you a great deal. If you win the next round, I'll just give you some innumerably large amount of money. Hey, that's really attractive. But if you lose, take your soul."
Isn't it just like all the money in the casino?
I think it's just all the money in the entire casino.
And it's not to be fair, it's not a shadowy figure. It's the devil. And the
devil himself.
Cuphead and Mugman go, and then the devil himself showed up. And
I thought he was like in disguise at first. I forgot that part of the sequence. Anyway, it's the devil. So they take I guess Mugman in his infinite wisdom says, "Hey, Cuphead, maybe nah." Cuphead just grabs a dice, throws them at Snake Eyes. They are both now bound to give the devil their souls. Now they beg and plead to be released of this bond, and the devil says, "Hey, you know what? I'll cut you a deal. I've got a number of other jokers who have tried to run away from their contracts. Tell you what, if you go hunt them down and collect their souls for me, maybe I'll cut you a break." And the boys agree to this, and then they begin this adventure where they travel through their land, finding
Island.
Yeah, they're basically they're basically bounty hunters now. And they bring in contracts, but before they do that, they go see Grandpa Tea Kettle or whatever his name is.
Yep.
And he bestows upon them the power to just shoot finger guns, pew pew, and
business guns all over the place.
And they start going through this land. Overall, there's 3 main levels, like overworlds, and then there's like a 4th level, sort of, if you want to call it that. It's basically the end of the game. You'll travel to all these places, interact with all of these interesting scenarios, boss fights, sort of side-scrolling levels, and once you collect all these souls, hopefully the devil will release you from your bond. But we'll talk about that, I guess, as we get into the discussion of this game.
Yes. So Cuphead, it's mainly a 2D platformer / shooter, I would say. You're Cuphead or Mugman. If you're playing 2-player, you play as Cuphead and Mugman. Each of them have finger guns. They can have up to 2 different types of finger guns equipped, and you can toggle between them.
One for each hand.
One for each hand. Different, but you don't shoot different. You toggle between 2. It's not like he shoots alternatingly with 2 different shots.
Right. You can't dual wield.
That would be so good. Let's get that mod going. Dual wielding finger guns. You have a jump, a dash, and a super move and a parry. So the way that the mechanics work, the jump is a single jump, and then if you press the jump button again while you're in air, Cuphead will do a parry slap. His little, I guess his straw will kind of whip forward and block any projectiles that are pink. So if you happen to perform the parry correctly near a pink object, you will that object will go away, and you will get some super meter for doing that. And you'll also kind of get a little double jump. And then your super meter is this meter that will slowly fill. Every one of your finger guns has a super move that you can perform by hitting the super button. And you have up to 5 they're cards that show up as you level up, as you get more super meter. And you can have up to 5 uses of your super move, but if you beat certain levels in the game, you get access to like super supers or hyper arts, if this was Street Fighter or something, or super arts that happen when you've got all 5 meters full. You can perform one super duper move that it varies depending on which one you have unlocked.
Mm-hmm.
And the game is largely taking on incredibly elaborate bosses.
Like multi-stage, multi-enemy boss fights.
Yeah, lots of multi-forms, some big changes in the tactics and stuff like that. Though there are also other types of levels. There are running guns, which is more of a traditional platformer, but with way more enemies because this game is much more of a shooter than it is a platformer. And also there are mausoleum levels where you have to protect a goblet from ghosts.
Chalice, sure.
A chalice from ghosts. Ghosts will come, they are pink, and you just have to parry them. And once you've parried all the ghosts, you gain access to a new super move. But that's pretty much it. And there's a shop where you buy items using coins that you get from the running gun levels. So the mausoleums get you super moves, the running guns get you coins, and then the bosses are what you have to actually beat to finish the game. So ostensibly you don't have to do any of the running guns if you don't want to. But man, it would be hard to beat the game with just the basic gun.
So I want to talk a little bit about the controls here for a second. Not necessarily what they do, but like controller configuration and controller setup.
Yep.
Did you guys change the controls at all?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I
Yes.
feel like you absolutely had to
sure.
if you're going to play on a
Yeah.
gamepad.
I think this game might have some of the worst default controls that I've played on a game in a while.
Yeah, so I think I forget the original controls, but it was like one of the gamepad buttons was shoot.
Yeah, so
Another one of the gamepad buttons was jump. The
I
other
can
one
tell
was
you
parry. The other
on
was
a PlayStation controller, this is
Yeah.
what the controllers are.
Yeah.
The controls are. The X button is jump and parry, depending on if you're in the air or not.
Mhm.
The square button is shoot. The triangle button is dash. You can do a horizontal dash. I don't know if we mentioned that. You can do a horizontal dash on the ground or in the air. The circle button is super. The right bumper
like
is,
R1.
Yeah, R1 is anchor to the ground, and then you can do a full 8-directional shoot instead of moving and shooting at the same time. L1 is change weapons between the two weapons, and then you move with the D-pad.
Yeah, so I changed my controls because I played on a controller that had L1, L2, R1, R2. I made shooting L2 like the trigger button, and I made dash R2 the right trigger button, and I kept left bumper and right bumper as what they are. So left bumper was change weapon, right bumper was anchor, and so the only thing I had to use my thumb on the face buttons was for jumping and supering.
Yeah.
And that just like completely changed the entire game because you could, in theory, you could keep your finger pulled on shooting and you could be dodging and jumping elsewhere on the controller.
Exactly. I did the exact same thing. I changed L2 to shoot. I did not change the dash. I found the dash didn't mess me up quite as bad, though X and triangle are far enough away from each other that sometimes when you have to do a quick jump dash, it can get a little hairy. But just moving, because this game, you want to be shooting at all times. And so, Pete, did you do the same thing?
Yeah, and I don't understand, just a brief aside, why you'd ever make shoot anything but a trigger button. I mean, it's literally called the trigger button. It makes perfect sense.
I mean, the only reason that you'd make it one of the face buttons is if you think that people are going to be pressing it over and over and over again. Like maybe because it's a platformer. Like most platformers don't use the triggers that often, but this game is not.
It's a shooter.
It acts like it's a platformer, and sometimes it pretends it's a platformer, but really it's way closer to a bullet hell shooter.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think that there should be a configuration where just auto shooting is what's happening. That you're just auto shooting at all times. Because I almost never felt, other than when I tried to pacifist some running gun levels, I never wanted to stop shooting.
No, there's no downside to continuous shooting. Like, you can't friendly fire or anything.
No,
There's no
and
ammo.
there's some times where you want to leave occasionally you want to leave an enemy on screen because you want to parry them instead of shoot them, and they can die to either. But even in those situations, it'd be better to then have a button that when you hold it down, you stop shooting, and then you're intentionally not killing that thing instead of having to hold this thing down. Like, my finger would just kind of cramp up because I had to hold down this button. And the real problem is if you leave the default control scheme, if you at any point want to jump or dash or use your super, that means you're not doing damage anymore. You're not holding down the shoot button. Like, it was such a game changer to be able to keep shooting while I was dashing, because I for so long couldn't. Like, my fingers would get all sorts of screwed up because of how tight. This game is not easy.
No, it's fast. It's hectic. There's a lot of
busy.
stuff on the screen at once. Yeah.
And
I'd say it sort of pays proper homage to your typical side scroll bullet hell game in the same sort of spiritual nature as like a Contra or a Metal Slug game. This game is not quite as side scrolly like a Mario level. Like Contra and Metal Slug feel like a Mario level that is a run and gun bullet hell as well. This is not quite like that. Only the run and gun levels are. But it's
you're not trying to make progress necessarily. You're trying to kill.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and how far into the game did you guys get before you changed the control scheme?
The title screen.
Yeah, like not very.
I got to level 3. I got to the third set of bosses before I changed it, because I usually just respect the developer's choices on this sort of thing. I try not to change schemes. I usually think, well, there was a good reason they chose this, so I'm going to go with it. But, man, I think that it's a tremendous mistake.
Yeah, whatever the good reason was, I never found it.
So I think I've mentioned in earlier episodes that one of the first things that I do when I approach a new game is I will go to the settings before I hit like start new game, and I'll see what kind of customization options there are. This is most important for me because I know that this was like a shooting type game. I didn't know if I was going to be in first person mode at all, but typically I like my X and Y axes like inverted a certain way. Typically I like more like airplane controls, if you know what I'm talking about, where like pulling down makes it go up and stuff like that. So I typically like airplane controls for some of these shooting games. And so I usually look at that kind of stuff. And when I saw that I could see the control scheme, I immediately was like, wow, that's a kind of I don't want to have to make my thumb play Dance Dance Revolution in order to play this game. Let's make this a little bit easier on myself.
Yeah,
but also,
that's what it felt like.
Yeah. But then I don't actually own Cuphead. I was playing with John and Devin, who have both been on this show before as well. They actually recommended to me once I saw the control scheme could be customized, they gave me some recommendations on what they preferred, and that's how I basically instantly started the game on a control scheme that worked for me.
Yeah, so listeners, if you are playing this game for the first time, definitely change the control scheme. And something else I wanted to talk about with the controls before we really get into some of the bosses and some of the specific levels is the parry system. Because this game's parry system, it feels like Cuphead was alternately inspired by Contra and games like Metal Slug and Contra, also inspired by like side-scrolling shooters, like an Ikaruga or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also inspired, it seems to be, by Street Fighter and fighting games, because it has a parry system similar to Street Fighter 3, and it has a super system similar to Street Fighter 2 and on. So both of these systems getting added in and most of the matches, you're fighting against these large bosses, and they're framed in the way a Street Fighter match would be. You know, get ready to fight.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a timer going up in the middle of the screen, or not in the middle of the screen, but after the match, it tells you how long it took for the fight, and you get a score in the way that you would in a Street Fighter game or something like that. Though I guess the score kind of applies to all three types of games. But the parry system, unlike Street Fighter 3, which is, I think, the most iconic parry system that I can think of. Billy, is there any other parry systems that really jump out to you? Or
You think in trying to compare this game to another game's parry system?
Just having a parry system, like parries at all, because I know that Dark Souls has parry systems, but Street Fighter 3 I think is the most apt for what they are going for here. Now in Street Fighter 3, the way that you parried was you would press forward at the moment when an attack was about to hit you, and your character would parry, and the attack would just get deflected, get defeated, and you would actually gain meter for parrying, and you would take no damage. But there was a risk-reward implied in that, because if you screwed up your timing, you just got hit because you weren't blocking.
Right.
Forward, back is block, forward is
not block,
nothing.
everything else.
Is everything else. Forward is get hit in the face. So if you just hit it properly, you got an extra benefit, but there was a high-risk reward.
So one of the most iconic uses of a parry system ever does come from Street Fighter 3. It's most affectionately referred to as Moment 37.
Yes.
If you're aware what I'm talking about, Gino?
Yes, the Daigo moment.
This is why Daigo, I guess one of the reasons, there's many reasons, but why he is almost considered a demigod in
Daigo
fighting
Umehara,
games.
what is his... I forget what his Street Fighter nickname is, but he is one of the greatest Street Fighter players from Japan. And there's an amazing sequence. Billy, do you want to describe it?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that clip dozens of times. Daigo was playing Ken, I think.
Yep.
And Justin Wong was playing Chun-Li. And the match was coming down to like the wire. I mean, this was like the grand finals, Evo, like it was unreal. And actually, I don't know if it was the grand finals or not, but it was like very late in the tournament, like a match that really fucking mattered for both of them. And Daigo was on the back foot. Back in Street Fighter 3, if you threw out like your super, it could just chip you out if you had low health and you could die. So all Justin Wong had to do was not screw up, get enough meter, and then just run at him and super in his face, and he would just be dead. Now Chun-Li, what?
If he blocked the super, he would die.
If he got hit, he would die. If he blocked, he would die. He had basically 0% chance of not losing if Justin Wong got into that position. Well, there was one very small chance. So Justin gets in, uses his super, and Chun-Li's super is like a 35 hit like lightning kick move. Daigo proceeds to parry every single one of these in succession, frame perfect, and then wins the fight afterwards. The crowd was like roaring on their feet because that had to be like a frame perfect execution of blocking a rapid multi-hit super. This is an example of the parry system in that game being, yes, high risk, high reward, but also having essentially a very simple system that has an extremely high skill ceiling. Yes. And its applications can just be so versatile. A great parry system.
Yes.
Cuphead's parry system,
I have real problems with Cuphead's parry system. So the problems I have with Cuphead's parry system is that you, one, can only parry while jumping, which means that in order to effectively parry something, you have to jump first. There are some... Now, this wouldn't be a problem if there weren't enemies and things on the ground that you sometimes want to parry. Because sometimes there will be attacks that travel along the ground or little enemies running at you along the ground. You need to first jump in advance of them getting there, or jump and press X so quickly that you immediately like snap parry, which I was not able to execute. Theoretically, you should be able to do it, but I have not seen it happen. So, first problem, things on the ground, when you're just standing, you can't really effectively parry. Second problem I have is that the parry system is really overloaded. When I say overloaded, I mean it has multiple functions that it is trying to accomplish, all with one solution. The parry system ostensibly is supposed to be how you just stop damage, but it also helps you gain meter. So you want to gain more super meter, you want to parry. You can also use the parry system as a functional double jump. So there are times where you will parry on something, and it will cause you to basically do a double jump. In the run and gun levels, you often will have coins that are out of reach, and so the thing you need to do is jump, parry an enemy, and that will jump you up to where the coin is. So that is sometimes useful for level design. And then the fourth thing that the parry system seems to try to accomplish is Some elements of the screen will sometimes be triggers, things that you need to parry in order to cause something to happen. Like one of the levels, there's a slot machine that has an arm, and the arm of the slot machine is pink, and so you have to parry the arm in order to make the next phase of the battle start. So all of these different things are all bound to the parry button. But while you're trying to manage this parry system, you're also playing a platformer, like a platformer shooter hybrid, that if you get hit, you generally in this game have 3 lives. You can get hit 3 times and then you lose. There is a passive upgrade you can buy that will give you a 4th hit, but that's the most you can really have outside of some extenuating circumstances. Which means that when you're playing this game, high risk, high reward is very high risk. If you screw up on a parry, that's 1/3 of your life gone. That's one mistake that you can't afford. 2, when you're parrying, the screen is full of garbage almost all the time. There's shots coming at you. There are little enemies running around. Most shots that you can parry will be like one of the bullets is parryable and the other 3 are not. That is the most common circumstance is like bullets that fan out and like one of the bullets is parryable. But if you parry it, sometimes you will do a double jump and be thrown into the path of another bullet that you cannot parry. And that was the most frequent punishment that I received for parrying, was damage. I would get a small amount of super meter, but I would just get put into a position that was way more dangerous than if I had just ignored whatever was getting shot at me.
So one of the worst cases of this that I experienced was actually in that slot machine boss, the 2 frogs that end up becoming a slot machine. When you want to hit the little pink lever to run the slot machine, it was pretty close to the mouth that spits out coins. So if you found a good window to run up and hit the slot machine, a coin might just spawn really close to you, and then you just instantly take a hit. That happened very frequently for us.
Yeah, there was a time where it was a boss, it was a mouse that has a tank, and one of his forms shoots just kind of like 5 bullets that start at one point of origin and then fan out. And there would be 2 that were parryable of the 5 bullets, but they were always at a distance where if I parried them, I would get thrown into the path of another bullet. So I just never got the timing to where if I wanted to parry, it was actually advantageous to do so.
Mm-hmm. I mean, really the only time I ever did was in those, chalice levels where you have to stop these ghosts from reaching it. And I mean, that was a fun little twist. Those levels were enjoyable in their way, but beyond that, the parry system, like you said, it's more trouble than it's worth.
Yeah, and those levels are designed. The only way you can interact with enemies in those levels is parrying. They are designed for parrying. Oftentimes in those levels, you are expected to keep parrying. You actually don't touch the ground. You just keep jumping using the parries. Yep. And that actually feels great, but that is not how any of the other levels are designed. Nope. And the parry system extra jumped out to me because there are actually side-scrolling levels in this too, where Cuphead becomes a plane, and it becomes just a bullet hell shooter. And in those moments, because you can't touch, there is no ground, there's no jump, you have full, complete
you're a plane.
Motion in all X,
you
Y
have
axis.
up, down, left, Y. You have up, down, left, right movement.
You
free
have full
to you
control.
completely. Yeah.
You can parry, like parrying in that circumstance behaves the way it does in a Street Fighter or something like that. You just press parry, you get rid of the bullet, and then
you can move any direction you want after that point.
You keep moving, you get meter. You don't have to move at all if you want to. You can just stand still and parry an attack that's coming near you.
Mm-hmm,
and so you can kind of just be, find a moment of quiet in this storm around you by parrying. But that is not how it behaves at any other time. And it's a real shame. Because I think it's a smart idea, and if some of these different elements were decoupled from each other, I think it would have made the game better. Like, if there was a double jump, so that those times where you parry, instead you're double jumping, like actually double jumping, I think it might have helped. I think that if there was a ground parry, if you just pressed, if parry was on a button that wasn't jump, if it was a separate button, and so you could do it on ground or in the air, and then you don't end up in situations where you accidentally press X again and then you're screwed.
See, I think the thing is, if you just completely separated double jump and parry, that's what you want.
Yeah.
Just maybe like allow a double jump, that'd be great. Parry's totally separate, great.
Yeah, but I think by trying to make the parry do too many things, they ended up hurting the overall mechanics, especially because they incentivize you to try to parry. I'm sure that someone who's very skilled at the game, I'm sure speedrunners will learn how to exploit this, and people who are more skilled will get more benefit. But I think the accessibility, you would not have heard it quite so much if you had, I think, separated some of these functions out into discrete controls.
Quick note on the speedrunning, most speedrunners only use parrying when they have to, and it's routed when you will parry in a specific level, because they usually only get their meter up to a certain amount because they've sort of done the math on how much they need, and so they'll intentionally parry in certain parts of the level that make sense and are maybe quote unquote safe to do, but they won't parry everything that they see.
Now, while we're talking about mechanics, Gino, you started this game slightly before I did, and you gave me some very good advice. I think you did, which was to buy the smoke bomb as early as possible.
Yes, I told you the smoke bomb, and then I think I also told you want the spread, and I don't know if I told you to get the roundabout. But those 3 bits of advice are what I've told everyone who I've talked to this game about. You want those 3.
Now, I might have forgotten about the other 2, but the smoke bomb's huge, because initially when you get your first dash, basically what the smoke bomb does is it adds an invincibility frame to your dash, which, in terms of, like we said, this is bullet hell, so evasion becomes critical. So not having that invincibility, I don't think there's any way you could play this game without the smoke bomb, I guess is how I would phrase it.
Yeah, there are some levels that you can get through without the smoke bomb, but there are some levels that feel next to impossible, or at least, much more difficult without it. And it's fair. In this game, you get coins from the running guns, and then you can go to a shop. And the shop has the same first starting 5 items. And then from there, once you've bought those, every time you buy an item, a new item comes to replace it. And the initial 5 that you get, if I remember them from memory, is Smoke Bomb. There's a sugar that will auto-parry the first thing that comes near you that's parryable. There's Spread, which is a kind of a spread shot. Think of Contra, something like that.
Like a shotgun kind of thing.
Yeah, like a shotgun. Short distance, but wide. There's Roundabout, which is a horseshoe that you shoot, and then it will go full screen the opposite direction after traveling forward for a short distance. And then there's Extra Heart. I think those are the starting items.
Yeah, I think you're right on this.
And the Extra Heart, you deal slightly less damage, but you have an Extra Heart. So you have 1 extra health, which is substantial in a game where you have 3.
It's a 33% increase.
Exactly. So those starting 5 are the starting 5 for a reason. You generally want Smoke Bomb is amazing, and Spread, and you can beat the game with Spread and Roundabout and Smoke Bomb and buy nothing else. By the end of the game, I actually got Roundabout last, like an idiot. That was the last thing I bought, and it turned out that the last few bosses, I only ever used Spread plus Roundabout plus Smoke Bomb. Now, maybe there are other passives that are good, but some of the other passive abilities that I saw were when you parry something for the first time, it does damage, which I don't even know how that works.
It was parrying something would trigger an axe move, like a descending axe move or something that would deal what they refer to as big damage.
Yeah.
It was effectively what maybe 2/3 of what a super could do. It's it was decent, but really situational. Most of the time, you weren't hitting anything that you cared about hitting.
Exactly, and then there were parrying something. The first thing you see automatically seems really dangerous because sometimes you don't want to parry, and the game just saying, "Oh, you parried that. Way to go." Occasionally doesn't seem super useful. But the smoke bomb, the thing about it that was so extraordinary to me was that it just allowed you to not need to jump. It changed the way that I approached the game. Like, there were some things that just moved along the horizontal axis, and instead of having to time my jumps or do anything specifically fancy, I could just hit the dash button and then appear on the other side of it.
Yeah, it turned the dash from a pure mobility move to one that became a tool of evasion, as opposed to just moving around the level.
Yeah, there were some enemies, like, for example, there's a clown boss that you have to fight, and his first form, he's riding in a little bumper car, and just kind of, he'll, like, wind forward and backward at you and dance at
what
you.
he's doing is he's trying to move, but he's hitting the edges, so he's got to go forward and back and, like, realign and forward and back and, like, awkwardly, like, reverse and drive forward.
Yeah, it's
But
really
then when
good.
he lines up...
Yeah, when he lines up, he dashes
Get
at
bumped.
you. And when this is happening, there are little ducks that are above you. And these ducks, if you shoot them, they'll spin, and then they're not dangerous anymore. But if you don't shoot them, you run into them, you take damage. So for a while, I was trying to approach this battle by, timing my jump to jump over the clown at the right time. And, sometimes there's a duck, and I'd take damage. And usually I would leave this relatively innocuous part of the fight with at least 1 damage. Because I just screwed up the dashing. But once I realized that if I just hit dash when the clown was coming at me, I would just appear on the other side of him and not have to interact with the stuff, one level up on the horizontal plane. And I just had to now worry about the clown. It just changed. That changed the way I thought about dashing and the way I played the game for the rest of the game.
So I want to talk about this
great.
a little bit. You're right, Gino, that there is a sort of a best loadout. Roundabout is one of the best projectiles So the reason why Roundabout's cool is because it shoots in front of you, and then it turns around and it basically goes full screen behind you.
Yep.
That's its gimmick. That's what it does. Going forward, it only goes about maybe half or like 40% screen.
But that's still about as far or farther than the spread in some other shots. It actually goes further
it's still
than
good.
some other ones.
It's still pretty decent, and it deals more damage than your regular pea shooter. So I used my playstyle kind of developed as I got better at mobility and dodging, but there is like a best speedrunning loadout. The only what am I trying to say? Like passive ability that you have is Smoke Bomb. They never touch any of the other perks at all. And playing the game with the invincibility frames that Smoke Bomb gives you changes the way you look at levels so much that it just completely invalidates all the other ones. Now I love the input of invincibility frames because I think it increases skill ceiling in so many ways. But the fact that it just negates everything else as a possible option, I'm like lamenting that as a design choice because those other ones just pale in comparison. You don't even choose them because they're just not good. So that's kind of frustrating when there are other possible cool features. Like I would have really liked to see that whetstone ability, like the axe one, be good. Maybe instead of it being like sort of a melee attack, you like release like a burst of like projectiles around you. That could be functional and cool, but it just didn't, like nothing else compared to the invincibility frames of Smoke Bomb. So you just ignored everything else.
The only times where I did not use Smoke Bomb were in levels where Smoke Bomb didn't do anything. So the side-scrolling shooters, the levels where you become a plane, I don't think that Smoke Bomb does anything.
It does in the plane level.
It does?
Smoke Bomb in the plane does the exact same thing. It makes your like dash, you go invincible for a few frames.
When you shrink, it makes you invincible for
the first before you're actually small, you do like a little spin move, and that's what's invincible. And if you hold it, then you shrink. So you get the iframes from Smoke Bomb in plane mode as well.
Oh,
that's
never mind.
Pretty huge.
Then never mind. I thought it didn't do it. I thought it didn't happen, and so I always picked the extra heart in those levels because I thought I didn't have invincibility frames. But that's then I would never pick anything else.
I forget the level, like the name of the boss, but it's the one that her final phase is she's like a moon, like a crescent moon face, and then
yes,
there's like UFOs coming at you that shoot laser beams.
I think it's Hilda.
Yeah,
Hildeberg.
Hildeberg or something like that. Anyway,
Yeah, 'cause she
the
starts as a blimp,
UFOs
doesn't she?
present to you
She's a blimp.
Yeah, the
Hildeberg.
UFOs present to you basically a wall of death that you cannot go around. You must go through at the proper timing, but sometimes you can get jammed up in you don't have a good window to do that. But Smoke Bomb lets you go through them when they're attacking if you time it right. You have an ability to go through an otherwise death wall because of that ability.
Yeah, there's just, it's a shame really that some of these items are just so much better. Another time that I noticed this was I bought Chaser earlier than I got Roundabout. Chaser is a shot. Yeah, it's a homing shot. Mm-hmm. It will just track in on your enemy, so you don't have to worry about aiming. You just, do platforming, and you're just steadily dealing a small amount of damage. So I thought that this would be useful because, some enemies just fill the screen with hot bullshit, and I don't want to think about aiming at them. But the problem with the Chaser is that, well, there's a few problems with it. One is that when you shoot and there are minions on screen, sometimes it will track to the minions and not the target you actually want to hit, and then it'll waste so much time going after them that it's not actually dealing damage to the main target. That's kind of annoying. But the bigger problem I found was that when I was near the edge of the screen, because sometimes bosses will force you there because you had to avoid something, if you're facing away from them and you're shooting at the edge of the screen, the Chaser bullets disappear when you shoot on the edge of the screen. They don't come back. They don't keep tracking. It's just like you never shot them at all. It's like there's a wall. Whereas the Roundabout, if you shoot it beyond the edge of the screen, the shots keep coming back. And so it's a circumstance where the Roundabout bullets behave the way you would expect. Enemies come from off-screen all the time. You expect that there is space there that you can shoot into.
Off-screen still kind of exists.
Yes. Usually you can't hit anything that's off-screen. Actually, no. There were times when I ran into things that were off-screen by jumping above the frame, which was a really fucking bullshit thing that can happen in this game, where I would, parry and then get bounced above the edge of the screen and then die to something that I thought was gone. But beyond that, the Chaser as a bullet type that you actually want to care about, I just couldn't use it because a lot of the times if I, was put into a wrong spot, and the game, different bosses will have different gimmicks. Some of them will be forced scrolling. Some of them will be forced vertical scrolling. Some of them will have platforms that you need to jump from. There's a bunch of different circumstances, and this gun that some of the time does not shoot, and its only advantage is you don't have to aim, means that I just never interacted with that. After I unlocked the Roundabout, I just stopped using anything else.
So I used the Spread, which was the shotgun ability. I used Chaser because I think it had some situational benefit, specifically in co-op. One person having Chaser was really nice in co-op. I'll talk about that in a second. And I used Charge. Charge is the bread and butter of the speed run.
I'd believe it. It does a lot of damage.
It does.
I never got used to shooting Charge. I never timed it right or practiced it.
I don't want to have to worry about holding.
Charge and Roundabout are the bread and butter of the speedrunner.
That's what I assumed. I always used Roundabout and Spread, but that's just because I didn't have the timing well on Charge. It seems like Roundabout is just the best gun because
I think it's all around
times.
The best. Yeah,
it's useful at all times. It's the only one that's full screen that will just go in a straight line. It's the only one that it's useful shooting forward and backwards. And if you just fill the screen with Roundabout bullets, they deal enough damage that generally if they hit a minion, they'll just kill the minion outright, and you don't have to keep hitting them.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I got that benefit from my use of Spread. I sort of treated I just liked Spread because I liked its EX a lot. Roundabout's EX was fine. I don't think it was particularly great compared to the other EX moves. And what made me transition away from Chaser, whatever it was, the homing shot, was that its EX was just actively bad.
Yeah, and when we say EXs, so the first supers, the first 4 levels of super that you get, the super you perform depends on what weapon you have. Once you get to level 5, then you've got a super move you can pick between 3 by the time you reach the end of the game.
The three that are available to you are basically a Kamehameha wave. You just like do a big cannon in a line direction, and it just DPSs, and you're invincible during those frames.
No, you're not.
What?
You're not invincible.
You're invincible when you're shooting that thing. Not like
immediately after.
Yeah, immediately after you can super die.
Yes.
But it can be used to grant iframes. For example, that's how I dealt with the level that had the UFOs. Is I would just run. Oh, sorry, that's not true, because that's when you turn into like a bomb. But anyway, there are some bosses where I would use that as iframes, but you had to be careful because as soon as you ended, you could get hurt again. Your second super makes you invincible for a short time, which is neat, but like it's not helping you kill things, which is what you want to do. It's only helping you not die, and that doesn't actually help you. And then the third one, I believe it buffs your damage, which is also cool, but like if you're ever put into a bad spot, you can't use it. It doesn't do anything for you.
It summons a Cuphead ghost who spins around, and then you have to control him with your normal controls. I used it once and then never again. I used that once. I used the Super 1 for a while, and then I switched to Super 2 because I generally found that I was capable of doing about as much damage as Super 1 did when I was using Super 2, but it was more reliable for surviving situations. Mm-hmm. But I think there's merits to 1 and 2. 3, I never found a good use for, which is good because it's the third one. You know, good that they give you the more useful ones up front. Though again, it's another situation where they give you the useful ones up front, and then it turns out if you go to the trouble of exploring, you don't get as many rewards.
So I was lamenting that there was only one support ability, and that was Smoke Bomb. The weapons in the game, some of them are neat but useless for being actually good. I want to talk a little bit about how some of these things interacted in co-op, because I don't think you guys played co-op yet.
No, did not.
So here's a couple things that change in co-op or that are added or different in co-op. First things first is that there's more bullshit on the screen. It's not the exact same boss fight. There's more projectiles to dodge, and they have more health. Their health scales up. If you die in co-op, you turn into a ghost, and you float upwards. If your ally can parry your ghost, you come back to life with 1 health. So taking damage in co-op is going to happen more often because it's harder. But there's a way you can bring your friend back. You can go resuscitate them. This made verticality different because your ghost is going up. So if you could stay more down if possible, that would ultimately give you more opportunity to save your friend as they were floating up. Because you could have different, each person could have, I guess on your run, you could have 4 different guns. You could have 2 on one person, 2 on the other. So combinations of guns became more important for different stages of the game.
Are you allowed to have both players have the same guns?
Yeah.
Or do you have to split them? Okay.
You can have all players have the same loadout, everything, but you can also mix them. So it was really nice to have one person have Chaser, because there were parts of the boss fight where they would just shoot little minions at you, and Chaser was really good at dealing with those while your friend was DPSing the boss. You were covering them. Yep. That happened a lot in the Sunflower level, I think. That was a really good example where that would happen. Also on the Candy Castle level where the candy corns and stuff would float around. That was another good example of that. Chaser was good because while something is running at your friend, they could be drawing aggro, and you could just be chilling and just DPSing from afar, and you could be really safe and out of the fight. So there's a lot of different mechanics of co-op that made it that made interesting interactions. That was cool. I think that was an opportunity for those different weapon types to shine. And they were lacking that. Co-op gives you that. You don't really see that as much in single player mode. Then the last thing I want to mention there is that the difficulty of co-op, I think scaled up actually so much harder, more than you would expect for just it being co-op. They don't just scale up damage. One thing is really big that makes co-op difficult. Yeah, there's more stuff on the screen, but every projectile makes a choice of which one it's going to attack, you or your friend. So if there's a bunch of projectiles on the screen, they could just all decide to go to your friend through like RNG, and they're just boned. You have no way of saving them, and they can't do anything about it. So you like every single projectile is a maybe threat, as opposed to in single player where if there's a homing projectile, you know it's going to go at you. So you can sort of like condition where it's going to be, but you just can't do that in co-op because it's going to make a choice. I think that makes co-op like another level harder than it would be otherwise, because it's not just putting more stuff on the screen, not just scaling up enemy health. It's making you have to make more choices that you just can't prepare for sometimes.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. Pete, did you play co-op at all or experience any of that?
No, which is unfortunate because I think the idea of pairing your partner's ghost back into the fight, that actually seems like a really cool mechanic and a much... I would have probably used parry a lot more if that had been an option, just to sort of revive them in that way. There's something about that's just appealing.
Yeah, and being able to bring them back into the fight means you functionally get extra health, which I think makes up for some of the inherent problems with just extra garbage being on screen. But I feel like the co-op mode kind of leans into some of the worst aspects of Cuphead's gameplay, which is it's so busy. There are times when there's just so much going on. And I think this is a good time to start talking about the visual style of the game, because we've largely omitted what might be the most appealing aspect of the game, which is it is gorgeous. This is one of the best-looking games I've ever played. It is a game styled after 1930s Mickey Mouse stylings, like that kind of cartoon.
Think Steamboat Willie.
Yeah, exactly. Think exactly Steamboat Willie.
Steamboat
think Popeye.
Willie. Mm-hmm.
Think Popeye, that kind of style. And every boss looks that way. Cuphead looks like off-brand Mickey Mouse.
The music is that too. The voice acting is like intentionally got like cracks and pops in it, and it sounds weird, like it was like poor audio booth recording layover. It's great.
The way they move too, like Gino, Popeye's a great example, because if you think about just like the way olive oil used to move, like with those sort of like really like out there limbs, like stretching out, coming back, right? The sort of just general shuffle everybody's always doing.
Real
you
legato.
recognize it instantly.
The official, like I had a buddy of mine in college that studied animation, and this was referred to as the squash and stretch. That makes perfect sense. How objects, like for example, if a ball was bouncing, when it hit the ground, it would squash and like squish itself, but it would do that in an exaggerated way, and as it was jumping up, it would stretch and get like skinny to emphasize its sort of inertia change. And that stuff happened really well in this game. It was just this game like respectfully and artfully paid homage to all of those cool styles, expertly done.
Yes, and it is pretty on point at all times. Like all of the bosses kind of draw from different characters. There's a mermaid boss that looks like Betty Boop. There's a pirate who looks exactly like Bluto. So you get a lot of these kind of like it's a little bit homage, a little bit knockoff. It kind of walks that line here and there, but I really, really appreciated the way everything looked. And when I say knockoff, I don't mean it like some of the designs were clearly, you can see where the inspiration came from. How that design is then employed is very different, very original. Like Betty Boop, yes, the mermaid has a Betty Boop face, but the way that mermaid, that whole level is designed and everything else, it's so much more than just they had a Betty Boop character in this game.
Betty Boop was based on a real woman.
Yeah.
I should look up what her name is now that I've said this.
Yeah. And a picture. Like, what's up with her eyes? Why are they so big?
Well, it's mostly the cheeks.
Huh.
Keep going. I'll figure out who it is.
So, this game is gorgeous. Playing it it's amazing kind of fighting. I like in a way that the enemies do not react that much to your bullets. They just kind of flicker a little bit to show that you're damaging them. But it looks like you're watching a cartoon, and this game might actually be better to watch someone play than to play in spots because of how much is going on.
Mm-hmm.
So most enemies in this game will just spawn tons of bullets. They'll spawn minions. They will, change sides of the screen. Sometimes there are levels that are forced scrolling, and if you're playing, you're generally watching Cuphead. You have to focus on yourself because there's so many bullets coming from everywhere that you can't really focus on the enemy. You can't really see all of the cool animations that are happening. But when you're watching someone else play, or you're playing co-op and you've got a little bit more breathing room, you can really appreciate everything that's going into this game. But it's almost a shame that they feel that they've chosen to make this game so difficult and so focused on evasion, because it really, I feel like, detracts from some of the artistic stylings, at least when you're playing single player.
Helen Kane, supposedly. She was a singer in the 1920s, supposedly the inspiration for Betty Boop. She actually sued the creators over the caricature.
Great.
Yep. Just because I brought it up. Fun Helen Kane fact for you guys.
Yeah, all of our Helen Kane fans out there. I don't know. Some of the designs, they're just so great. What was your favorite boss? Your favorite fight?
Mine was probably the robot guy at the end.
That was a good one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I liked Hildeberg, as she was the first plane level, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That was good. This is the first plane one. I also liked, there's like a princess in a castle, and like the castle sort of attacked you as well. Do you remember the one I'm talking about?
Yeah, that's the like Candyland lady.
Yeah, there's like a Candyland woman. That one, probably my favorite outside of Hildeberg.
Yeah,
I think
two.
my least favorite level was the honeybee level.
Yes, that was my least favorite as well.
It wasn't least favorite because it was like a bad fight. I think it offered the least in like the aesthetic. It had like the most uninteresting sort of like one-dimensional aesthetic. It was like just honeycombs in the background and a bee lady, and all the other levels had like, I guess, again, like you said, it's sometimes more fun to just watch this game than to play it. But if you looked at the other levels, there was like tons of like little like micro interactions of background characters and stuff that were rewarding and valuable. That just really didn't happen in this level. It was just like wrapping paper or wallpaper in the background, but of bee like honeycombs, and that was it.
Yeah, I didn't like that level because the platforms that you had to jump on, it was a forced vertically scrolling level, and the platforms would randomly appear. So like the configuration of the platforms would be random. So some levels you would get tons of platforms and it was very easy to maneuver, and other times there'd just be gigantic gaps that would require you to make very dangerous jumps and dashes to even stay alive. And I found that to be a recurring nuisance, where the amount of RNG of random elements in the game would greatly change the difficulty from playthrough to playthrough. Sometimes I felt less like I was getting better at the game and more like I was waiting for the run that was easy enough for me to win.
Like through RNG and stuff.
While we're discussing the art style, I mean, it's definitely just flat out gorgeous. I think it's worth asking why it resonates so well, or why it works so well for us as an audience, right? Because have you guys ever seen all of Steamboat Willie?
No.
Right? Like this is a nostalgic touchstone for an era we have no contact with. Right, so my question is, there's sort of two options, right? Either this art style is just so good in the abstract that anyone's going to resonate with it, they're going to enjoy it, whether they're connected to it or not. Or two, it's sort of percolated so far forward into modern day animation that we still recognize its antecedents in this sort of Steamboat Willie idea.
Yeah, I would say that option B is more what I agree with, because this style of animation had so many ripples throughout how just animated television is done, period, that you can see the different elements that other artists took from this style throughout the years. Like Japanese animation, Japanese anime was generally, one of the points of origin was Steamboat Willie, Disney, Mickey Mouse, like Kimba the White Lion and some of the 1970s anime. You can see, like Astro Boy, stuff like that. You can really see the inspiration with the big eyes and some of those characters. And so you actually have, at a point, had multiple histories and multiple styles of animation all originate at this exact moment.
I agree with your point, Pete, to an extent. I think it becomes more and more valid the younger the player is. But I still, I think people that are our age, probably from ages 20 and up, would still have the possibility of being connected with that art style, because there still existed VHS tapes from the 90s that had compilations of all this good art, that had this good artwork. So you're right that the origin of it was in the 20s, 30s, and before any of us were born. But I still had
I'm
VHS
actually
tapes.
97 years old. I just
All right,
noticed
well, you're just obviously killing it at the gym because you're
I know, I look
you're
great.
looking great. That's what you get, folks, for never skipping leg day, honestly. But I remember like old VHS tapes of, I mean, like VHS tapes, like these animations were invented before VHS tapes, but when the VHS technology came to prominence, these things got like ported onto them, so they got sort of reborn for home entertainment. And since that was possible, I was able to access that realm. So I have a pretty broad childhood exposure to this kind of animation style, the really, really old school stuff, because it was always at my grandma's house.
Yeah.
So
And
it's not so disconnected that we can't experience it. I think that like a 18 and under kid is going to have the disconnect because they're probably not going to have that kind of exposure.
And I think it's also worth mentioning when I was little, Popeye was still getting rerun. There were
Mhm.
some of these shows that would actually get rerun
Yeah, I've seen
depending on
Popeye.
when you
Woody
were watching.
Woodpecker. I used to watch. He was still around.
We could still
Yeah.
see Tex Avery stuff when we were a kid, like on TV. Tex Avery and all the Looney Tunes, Mel Blanc voice acting and all that stuff. We could still see all that on TV as we were kids. So
And
yeah,
shows like the Animaniacs very directly, I
Mhm.
think, were inspired by this era. So there
I-
were enough things that have, echoed forward that you can still see the element. You can still kind of relate it back to your own childhood, even though this specific style with these specific designs might not match your childhood.
that
Now-
said, I
Well-
want to try to help Pete's point a little bit now.
Okay. I have a follow-up
Um,
question, but Billy, you do yours first.
So here's, I guess, a question that's gonna hopefully help Pete's point. We like this game, and this game is good in many ways because of its aesthetic choices. It leans into it really, really hard.
Mhm.
If we take away the aesthetics, like just the color scheme and the art style, and replace it with other stuff, that's still fine, but not this art style. Are we gonna like this game anymore? Probably not. It just falls into one of the basic bullet hell Contra copycats. And I think this game loses a ton if it loses its art style. So this game is, in many ways, a visual package much more than it is a gameplay package. And that's probably going to support Pete's claim that we're leaning into this nostalgia factor really hard for the success of this game.
Yeah, I think that the mechanics don't necessarily carry this game the full distance, and I believe that the running guns and mausoleum levels were added after that. This game was actually unceremoniously announced during a montage of Xbox Live Arcade games, I believe, like 3 or 4 years ago. It was just in the montage. They didn't have the developers up. They were like, here are games that are coming soon.
Yeah, here's the
Cuphead.
thing.
And then when I saw that, I was like, "What the fuck? Is that actually a game? People are playing that?" It showed, I forget which boss. It was
I
a
think it's
boss that they were
Hildeberg.
fighting.
I think I remember seeing promotional stills of when she turns into like that half crescent moon.
Yeah, but when you saw this game in motion, it was like literally no game you'd ever seen before. And when it got all that buzz, I believe the developers added the running guns and added more to flesh the game out further. And I kind of feel like if they had just stayed with the boss rush, it would have been a little bit more focused, and maybe that would have helped.
Yeah, a little bit cleaner, a little bit tighter. Now, I think the follow-up question here is basically what are the outer limits of nostalgia, right? So even if we think, okay, what makes this attractive to us is we can see the roots of animation we grew up with, whether or not, like Billy said, we've probably seen close to this time era at some point. But even if we hadn't, let's say we could see the roots of this in previous generations. But then you can take that argument farther back, where like that animation style emerged from, cartoons, satirist, political cartoons in newspapers, right? Before we even had cartoons, like televised cartoons as a medium. Right. So how far could we take that back to the point where like, okay, we still have this nostalgia factor and now we're into like 1870s political cartoons and what they looked like. Now, I think, well, yeah,
Well, to answer that, I guess my question would be, where do you draw the line between nostalgia and appreciation of a now defunct style within historical context. So, for example, when I was in Japan, I listened to some old Japanese music at a temple. It was, centuries old Japanese music played on instruments that, are not really used in popular Japanese music anymore. But it sounded like nothing I'd ever heard before. It was not something that I would have gone out of my way to buy a CD for necessarily, but getting to hear this style that I'd never heard before on an instrument I'd never heard before, but understanding that this was a completely different lineage and history of music. It had a time scale that was even different than what Western music uses. Being able to appreciate in that context, I was able to appreciate it and enjoy it with that knowledge in mind. And even, I now I have greater context when I listen to other more contemporary music. And just having that appreciation of history and of styles that expand your horizons, I think that appreciation does not necessarily we might use nostalgia as a shorthand because it is something that is old that we are appreciating, but I feel like nostalgia also connotes that it is something that you cannot appreciate without a childhood or a previous appreciation for that thing. It is recalling an appreciation that you had when you were younger.
I think what I wanted to denote here, and Gino, you're making a fair point. In this case, I think nostalgia, I don't necessarily have a great answer for you. The best I can say is I think in this case, nostalgia refers to a general sort of warm, fuzzy feeling you get when you play something like Cuphead or you see something like Steamboat Willie. Now, that might be a function of the style itself rather than the historicity of it. But if I'm just sort of appreciating something for a historical medium, I don't have that warm, fuzzy feeling. And I think that's particularly relevant in this case because the contrast between the warm fuzzies of the art style and the sort of white-knuckle tension of a bullet hell, I think is at the crux of what makes this game so successful.
Do you feel similarly about maybe Undertale, but in a less positive way?
So.
Yeah, I know. But do you think Undertale and Cuphead are trying to aim towards the same razor-thin edge here?
I think so, again, but Undertale doesn't have that contrast that I think is key here. And you can have your strength could be, the similarity between art style and feeling it should create is a strength as opposed to the contrast. You can run it either way.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, the appeal can be very different depending on the player. I appreciated Undertale's consistency a little bit more than I appreciated Cuphead's opposite dichotomy. And
but I think,
go ahead.
What I'm trying to say is I think as you travel into the past, eventually that warm, fuzzy feeling necessarily ceases.
Because it just has no relationship to anything you've personally experienced?
Yeah, again, we're dealing with affect now, and I'm not well versed in affect theory in the first place, so I can't really make a great argument for why. But I feel like just inherently it feels different at a certain point. And I couldn't say that point's 1905. Anything before December 31st, 1940, 1904, it's not there anymore. But I feel like at a certain point you hit this limit case, and I'm wondering what it is, what changes, and maybe there's no answer there.
So let me respond with two things.
Sure.
One, I think I can take your nostalgia point a little bit more. I can understand with it and agree with it more because the two levels that I didn't actually say which of the levels I enjoyed the most. The two that I enjoyed the most were actually the dancer or the performer. She's on a stage and you fight her and she does dive kicks like she's a Street Fighter character.
Yeah.
And then her final form, she becomes the final boss from Final Fantasy VI, pretty much. She starts summoning meteors, and she starts using lightning spells and stuff. And her character model is like a cartoony version of the final boss of FF6. And the train, the Phantom Train that you fight, that is another boss that was inspired. I can't see how it wasn't inspired by Final Fantasy VI. You fight a train in that game. A train full of ghosts. And those two levels, they appealed to me that much more because I got the reference. I got the thing. It appealed to me because it took a 2D, 8-bit, or 16-bit game or reference that I've seen before that I really appreciated and put it into a new style. It felt like fan art of a thing that I already enjoyed, and that made me like it all the more. And so I can definitely appreciate that. But one of the ideas that I'm coming back to here is maybe with the way that media has been preserved and been exposed, like we might be one of the generations that is most exposed to media from throughout history, because YouTube and internet archiving has made almost every generation before us that we can digitally preserve available to us. And it kind of leads to, I think, a generation that is in a constant present. But that present is just marinating in centuries of history, or at least decades of history. So, for example, when I was growing up, I actually knew lines from Popeye and stuff like that, and I would reference it, and my parents were like, why the fuck do you know that line from Popeye?
Like, that was before us.
You're 6. Yeah, how do you know that? And I'm like, oh, they show reruns. And my parents were like, really? They show reruns of that? And I was like, yeah, so I know about it. And so there's just an availability of information now that you can be enthralled with a culture or a history or a historical moment and like experience all of it, even though you're completely removed from all the years of context or years of time that would have been released in. So you can actually become completely immersed in a historical moment, and it can become instantaneous. Like, you could probably watch all of old Disney stuff in like a weekend if you wanted to, and you become an expert on it, where someone who had actually lived through that moment would have seen these small changes and, you know, the evolution take place in a matter of years or decades.
It's a great point, Gino, but I would still say at a certain point things stop being the past and start being capital H history, right? And that it carries a certain, you know, sort of textbook feeling to it, a certain cobwebbiness, that we interact differently with capital H history than we do with sort of, you know, kitsch from the past.
Yeah. And I think that the big difference between capital H history and kitsch is kitsch.
And yeah, let me just say, we're not using kitsch in like a dismissive sense. Just we need to separate that from the history, like we said.
Help me understand a little bit, Pete, in like a more like modern day history perspective. You know, there's definitely a realm of events that we would call like current events. There's definitely a realm of events that we would call like our lifetime recollection of facts and experiences. And then there's a series of human history that goes for a long way, but it's like nobody today was alive then, nor does anyone today know anybody who was alive then. And like you go to a certain point where it's like this is just history books now, as opposed to something that anyone's interacted with. Are you trying to aim at that as your capital H history?
I'm trying to say this, right? Like, if we looked at Sears catalogs or just any catalogs from like the 1930s, that could be kitsch. We'd look at it and be like, oh, like cool, like this is kitschy, this is nice, this is fun. I get a fuzzy feeling when I look at this. I'm going to say if we looked at Sears catalogs, if they existed, right, from the 1830s, that would become capital H history.
Like almost foreign to us?
Right, we're so far removed from it that the only really interaction we can have with it at that point becomes more of an academic one as opposed to an affective one.
Yeah, and I think that the way that the dichotomy for me, the thing that separates the two, is the things that have happened since the 1920s or 30s, the ones that have been in the moment where digital recording and preservation through pictures and photography, the forms of media that we are used to consuming. Once you're captured in one of those and then you're uploaded to the internet or you're shared in some sort of way, people of any age can now experience it in a framework that they can understand as contemporary. Mm-hmm. When I watch a historical video on YouTube, it feels like I'm watching any other YouTube video. The content is just very different. And so everything around that is contemporary. All the trappings around the video are contemporary. I can absorb that information as though it was contemporary. But when I'm reading an archive or going through microfiche or something like that,
Gino, when have you ever gone through microfiche?
Never. I've never gone through microfiche. But when you go through all of these more archaic forms of media, it feels like a distinctly different thing because you have to actually go through a very different process outside of your normal life.
Mm-hmm.
Even old newspaper clippings, I feel like some of them, the layout looks the same. It feels like a normal newspaper that you might get nowadays, but the vocab is different. But some of the very, very old ones, they don't discernibly look like
They're
a
totally different.
newspaper nowadays. So you process them differently.
Yeah.
And so I feel like our modern moment is kind of compressing a ton of history into contemporary frameworks, and it loses its larger than life status as history as a result.
I think you basically hit on the answer that I probably would have pushed towards, is that it's a question of medium. And when you see these big medium shifts, from moving pictures to just, standard type, you see these jumps between nostalgia and history, let's say.
Yeah, and I think it would be a really interesting project if someone took a bunch of old articles or old editorials and just uploaded them into a modern WordPress format or something, like a really modern-looking, sleek website, and then just didn't tell anyone that these were old or something like that. And just, it might seem weird, but just to see if people even perceived that this was 100 years old writing or 200 years old writing just because of the presentation.
I think newspapers, you might, depending on what it is, you might have more trouble with. But I think things like ad copy, or like how much does ad copy really evolve across, decades, let's say?
Exactly. It'd be really interesting. And Cuphead, thanks for spurring this.
Yeah.
Cuphead, I think they walk the fine line between homage and nostalgia and just actually creating something new.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these designs themselves, though they evoke certain things from, old Disney cartoons, I think that the actual designs themselves are different enough that they rise above that.
Absolutely.
That designation. So with that in mind, is there anything, what did you guys think of, were there any moments that really jumped out at you when playing the game, like moments of extreme difficulty or the final ending of the game that you really want to talk about?
I found this game difficult, but I'm not gonna say that it was it was hard for me.
It wasn't that's Devil Daggers difficult by any means.
So this is what I want. So I play Fury, and that game is really good for me, and it's you hitting your head against a boss until you crack its layers of complexity and learn its patterns and stuff. So it's hard, but I don't think, for me personally, it's a hard game, because when I think of a game that's difficult, it's difficult so that it's a little bit discouraging, and you kind of like, oh man, I'm never gonna get this. I go into a boss fight and I know that I'm gonna die 20 times, and I want that until I eventually crack the exterior, and I start changing my playstyle for skill. So yeah, it was difficult. Was it rewarding? Not all the time. I found the elements of random to be kind of frustrating, but I felt that more in the co-op, and I actually had a pretty massive gameplay experience change when I went to single player, because I actually played this game more in co-op than in single player, because I had to play it at my friend's house and they just want to play with me. So I noticed a big difference when I didn't have to randomly guess if stuff was going to come at me or not. Here's one good example of when RNG, I think, was poorly placed. I think in the Hildeberg fight, there was one thing that she could throw out at you that was a spinning orange disc, and it would start a machine gun fire, and it would be a line of bullets that would start rotating, but it was RNG where it started, and you had no way to prepare for where it was going to shoot because you didn't know where it was going to shoot, so it could just start on top of you and then you could die.
Yeah, there were plenty of times where there was a thing that I knew had a variety of choices that it could make, and it would just sometimes make the shittiest choice for me personally.
Yeah.
I will say that there is cool stuff that you can do, like in the King Dice fight. Part of that battle is you parrying a spinning die, and that determines how much the his little roulette meter or something will go up, and if you land on bad spaces, bad stuff happens, and if you land on good spaces, good stuff happens. You can get extra health in that phase. You can get like safe passage through most of that interaction. And one way you can kind of cheese it out is by spamming the start button and like frame by frame checking the die, so that you can know what you can, like, as it's like turning, you can see what's coming up next and say, oh, I'm paused right now. The next number is the one that I want. I'm going to parry it at just the right time. And that actually is a throwback to Mega Man for me, because part of the Mega Man games, like speedrunners, would shoot an enemy and then they'd pause the game while their hurt box was like on the bad guy, and then they'd pause and unpause and pause and unpause, and every time they did that, it would hit the enemy again. So they would just like shoot a blaster at him one time, and it would just like, they would like pause and unpause, and every single frame it would hit them. And that's kind of what I was doing with the King Dice fight. So that's not necessarily a moment that stands out like this game was really hard and I overcame it. It was like, oh wow, like even though that's probably an unintentional aspect of the game, it's still paying homage to other games, like retro games that have done stuff like that.
Yeah, I actually, with the King Dice fight, it starts on the same. I think if you parry at the first available moment, it's always a 1. And I noticed that timing, and I just always, I knew I could guarantee a 1 if I needed it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of interesting. Though I think that the King Dice fight, it had just all the elements of randomness that bothered me sometimes. Because sometimes if I screwed up on the dice, I would get, you can fight up to 9 mini bosses before you fight King Dice.
Yeah.
And
it gets to be a
that
lot.
was just really annoying.
I would like to shout out King Dice's music though, especially before you go to like new worlds. He shows up and is like, "Hey, good work." If I could have that music play every time I entered a room with that mustache, I think I'd be president inside of like 20 years. Just because that's the age limit I would need to hit.
Yeah. I did like the big band music as well.
Yeah, it was good.
It was nice.
I like Pork Rind a lot. Pork Rind did a lot for me. The shopkeeper. Pork Rind's Emporium. Like, he had like a bad voice acting clip that was like, "Welcome.
Welcome.
Goodbye.
Goodbye." He's gross to look at. He sounds gross.
His name is Pork Rind.
His name is Pork Rind, but he sells you things, and they're what you need.
It's just pretty good. I don't really have anything else on Cuphead.
Yeah, I think for me, at first I hated Cuphead. I was like not liking it for a while because of I was using the bad controls.
Yeah.
Once I fixed the controls, it started growing on me a little bit more. Then I started hitting walls with bosses, and then I would get frustrated. But mainly what I came to was this game, I think, is Mega Man for a new generation.
Mm-hmm.
It is kind of brutally unfair and difficult. It is difficult, bordering on unfair. Like, it asks you to do some things that are not necessarily fun, but it looks amazing. It has very novel ideas in it, and the music is great.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it will hold a place of fondness, despite some of its flaws.
Yeah, and I think the fact that it has a pretty decent co-op mode, though co-op offers more challenges than I think it tried to. If you play with somebody who has already beat the game and is pretty good and knows their play style, then you can let your friend play and they can experience a lot of the game, and you can save them by being good. Like, you can resurrect them if they die pretty regularly, so that they're still able to play the game and have fun to a degree, without, being thrown into something that they can't handle by themselves.
Yeah, though I don't quite get the Game of the Year buzz around this game.
I think it's really just for the art style. Like,
for what, last year?
Yeah, for 2017.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I mean, it had a decent amount of Game of the Year buzz around it and like nominations and stuff. I don't know that it won any Game of the Years outside of style categories and art categories, which it deserved to win.
Absolutely for those.
But in terms of actual Game of the Year, like play, I don't know. It was pretty good.
My last thought, I'm pretty much done after this. My last thought for Cuphead is back to an earlier discussion about the speed running. I like it when speed runs make you play the game as best and as optimized as possible. But if you watch a speed run of this game, most of the running guns, they're just dashing through everything and ignoring everything in the level, and most of the boss fights are rinse repeat loops of using the charge attack or roundabout. And the cool parts about it are like math and calculating how much super you need to like do the math on the last phase you got to get through or something. That's pretty cool, but I much prefer a game that is speed runnable because you do the stuff that the game's asking you to do, not just ignore most of the levels and do the exact same thing over and over again, just fast. I think this game lacks a little bit of speedrun potential. There are speedrunners that are running it, and I'm sure it's going to be at the upcoming Games Done Quick, which I think is running now or starting.
Yeah.
It just started this weekend.
Yeah, the weekend of or I guess the week of the 8th.
Yeah, so it's starting. Yeah, it's like the 8th through the 15th or whatever, and it's almost certainly.
It's actually running on the 7th, so I don't know when it officially started, but I'm sure Cuphead will be there.
Yeah, I mean, Cuphead's almost certainly going to be there in some kind of run, so it has speedrun value, but I don't think it'll persist as like a classic speedrun game like Super Metroid or something.
Yeah, it does not look. There's nothing about it that looks especially broken when you're playing it via speedrun. Mm-hmm. It's like watching a Super Meat Boy speedrun. It's like, yes, you're very good at this game, sir, or madam. You are amazing at this game, let me just say. But you're doing what everyone else does, just you don't screw up.
Right. Like, I want to see a speedrunner have, like, frame-perfect glitches and exploits, or, like, frame-perfect, like, weapon interactions. Like, I want to see breaking the game apart, not just doing it fast and skipping most of the stuff.
Yeah. My favorite speedruns are like, there's a BioShock speedrun I saw where they picked up a trash can, moved it near a part of the level where you're supposed to, there's a wall there, so you're not allowed to go over it, but they jump on top of the trash can and jump over the invisible wall, and then they just leave the level and skip an entire level. That's what I like.
Yeah, that's great.
I watched a Skyrim speedrun where a person picked up a bucket and then jumped on the bucket and then jumped over a wall that they weren't able to climb. That's what I like. Garbage. Hot garbage.
Yeah, I'm pretty much done with Cuphead.
That's our discussion of Cuphead. That was my pick, so Pete,
yeah,
it is your time to pick again.
That's me. So last time I came around, I was between two games. We ended up going with The Binding of Isaac, so I thought this time around we just go with the other one I was thinking about. So our next game will be Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons.
Nice.
Cool.
Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons will be our next game, and that should do it. So remember, if you want to get in touch with the show, do so at ThatPinguino or at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. Hit up our comment sections, and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. And this week I actually had a article go up on Game of the Year Detention on Waypoint, waypoint.vice.com.
Yep, check it out. It's a great article, everybody.
If you were not convinced about Detention, you can check out my article there. Even the bleakest horror games end more hopefully than Detention does. So check it out if you can. And with that, thank you, Billy.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I'm excited to keep playing some good games. 2018 is looking pretty promising for the show.
Yep. Thank you, Pete.
Always a pleasure, guys. Make sure you circle back for Brothers next time.
And until next time, peace!